everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the Unlocking Fitness podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Pitts, and today's episode we're going to be diving into the 7 steps to bring your warm-up into the 21st century. Now, warming up has been a standard coaching practice for decades. I remember doing it in high school, and I'm sure you do too. But 4 or 5 years ago, I was researching existing practices and came across this quote from the nsmi.org.com, must get that right. And it said, the most important reason for doing a warm-up is to prevent injury during exercise. Keeping the muscles warm will prevent acute injuries such as hamstring strains and will stave off overuse injuries by allowing the body to prepare steadily and safely. And that's great, but it's not really reality. People still get injured despite our best efforts, and even the most up-to-date versions of fitness industry course textbooks are using references from the 1990s, some of them are even further back than that, and many sports don't even have any formal coaching education. So while our practices might have been cutting edge 30 years ago, they really aren't now, and the growing injury rates support this. Versus Arthritis published a report on the state of musculoskeletal health in 2021, which said that back pain was the leading cause of years lived with a disability, so it was prolonging disability, and around a third of the UK population have musculoskeletal problems such as arthritis or back pain, and musculoskeletal conditions account for up to 1 in 3 GP consultations. But it's not just musculoskeletal health, and in adults either. The Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine published a study in 2020 that concluded that young athletes, and in particular females, were more likely to be injured and sustain an overuse injury if they had a higher degree of sport specialization, which kind of indicates to me that the amount of repetition that we do in sport is a real problem. And even worse than that, or making the problem even worse, is the fact that during the first lockdown in the UK due to COVID, Bupa reported 7 million minor sprains and muscle pulls as people tried to get fit. And this is really important for us as coaches because pain is the one thing that prevents all aspects of fitness from happening, and the biggest risk factor for injury is actually a previous injury. So nowadays, our sessions are just full of people who are either injured, have been injured, or will be in the future. And things have moved on a long way in the last 30 years, and it's time our warm-up practices reflected that. So today we're talking about 7 steps to bring your warm-up into the 21st century. I hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. So step 1 is focus on improving movement above all else. Now, most people think of a warm-up in terms of raising heart rate and body temperature, and some might even think of raising exercise intensity for the upcoming workout. But the thing is, all movement generates heat, which means that if I'm sitting down and I open and close my hands for long enough and fast enough, then eventually my feet will get warm. But that doesn't prepare my feet for exercise. So not all movement actually helps prepare the body for exercise. And I've seen examples before where people have been, let's say they've been jogging for a warm-up, and the very next movement is laying down on the floor and lifting heavy weights with the chest, for the chest press or something like that. But the thing is, people come to exercise either first thing in the morning before they go to work or before school starts or something like that, or when they've been laying down in bed all night, or they do it after school, after work, on an evening when they've been sat down all day. So that means we're getting them at the point where they're at maximum stiffness. And physical and emotional stress are 2 leading risk factors for injury because they increase the amount of muscle tightness we have, which restricts movement. So, like I said, we're getting our people at maximum physical stress, and then we add more by doing exercise. And nobody even mentions the emotional stress side of things. We think that the natural high of exercise will reduce that for us. But if we stop focusing on the physical activities of a warm-up with the only goal of raising the heart rate and body temperature, we can actually be much more effective. And we do this by focusing all our efforts on improving movement. Because when we improve movement, we decrease the amount of muscle tightness, which reduces the risk of injury. We decrease the physical stress, and that decreases emotional stress too. And the last thing we want, and our people want, is to have more things to do before a workout. It just makes them feel like we're making life hard for them or that we're putting things in their way. So we need to forget about foam rolling and stretching and everything like that. We just use simple movement to do it. Step 2. Use as much variety of movement as possible. You've probably heard the phrase, use it or you'll lose it. And bodies adapt to movement just like they do to fitness. So our over-reliance on one way of moving eventually creates an inability or a reduced ability to move in any other way. And since all forms of sport and exercise are repetitive in one way or another, sometimes, there are elements, obviously, where we do need to perform certain skills a given way for safety. But warming up is not a time for that. It's a perfect opportunity to move in any way other than that in order to break or counter that over-reliance on the same movement. So let's take walking around the room as an example. I mean, if you ask a group of people to walk around the room, really quickly you'll see them all walking around the edges of the room in a circle. And it's not that we're not capable of walking in any other way, it's just that we've been doing round the edges for so long that we don't even consider any other way. And our bodies do the same with ways we move. If we always walk with our toes pointing forwards, eventually we'll forget that other ways are actually possible. And our feet, knees, ankles and hips will all tighten as a result of how we're using them. And that makes it harder for us to move in different ways when we want to. Something as simple as walking with toes in and then toes out can be challenging to some that are too ingrained in performing the task that one way. But this simple variation can work wonders in preparing the hips, knees, ankles and feet for more exercise, especially if it involves running or squatting. And the variations don't need to stop there. In fact, it's better for our emotional and physical health if we don't, especially if we make it fun. Step 3. Make it lighthearted. Fun is subjective. It means different things to different people. But the benefits to your coaching from making your warm-up lighthearted are immense. Your people will forget about their busy lives for a minute, which decreases emotional stress and decreases muscle tightness, which decreases their risk of injury. You will remove the pressure of having to get something right or do it properly, which can be huge if somebody's feeling exceptionally stressed in their life. The pressure of feeling like they've got to do it right can be huge. And if you can take that away for 5 minutes, then that can be very impactful on their lives. You'll bring the focus to you and your session. I mean, we've all had those people at the back of the group who are still chatting about their day while you're trying to explain what's going on, and then they spend the next 5 or 10 minutes asking everyone else what they should be doing. So if you can get their focus on you very quickly and away from their life and what they've been thinking about for the last 24 hours, then that's great. And it makes your session an even more enjoyable place to be. And you might have somebody who's a bit borderline in terms of wanting to go or not. And when you make your sessions lighthearted, it might just tip the balance into them coming to your session even though they didn't really want to. And lightheartedness or fun doesn't necessarily need to be funny either. Depending on your group, you could introduce what I like to call imagine elements. So again, going back to that walking around the room example, you could ask them to imagine that they have chewing gum on the bottom of the shoes. How would they walk if the chewing gum, they didn't want to touch the chewing gum to the floor, so they had their toes in the air, or the chewing gum was really sticky, so they had to lift their knees really high to get the foot off the floor. Imagine that your knees are stuck in a bent position. How would you walk if you couldn't straighten your legs? Or maybe you're trying to appear taller than you are, or that you wake a crying baby or set off an alarm or something like that. I mean, all these are light-hearted instructions that will conjure up different ways of moving in everyone. And they're ways of moving that they don't feel like they have to get right or think too hard about, but they're just enough to get the mental juices going, which leads us into step 4. Step 4, making it mentally challenging. Now, I don't mean so complex that they give up. I mean, we've seen that before. Somebody was very, very stressed in their daily life, and then they came to a very, very technical session and they couldn't get it right, and they were just really frustrated and they were fed up of trying to repeat the whole thing all the time, and they just left. You know, that you don't want to push people to that point, but a coordination challenge or adding imagination brings the focus inside of the body, which keeps the body in rest and digest for longer. So the two nervous systems, rest and digest, or fight or flight. And when you're in rest and digest, it helps people to decrease the stress of the day, like we've spoken about before, but also decrease the length of time that they're pushed into fight or flight by the main workout. And this means we can prepare the body for movement and improve the ability to move without stress or strain. And this short break in the sustained fight or flight that many people are stuck in might be the difference between getting injured or not in your session, and over the long term can keep people involved in sport and exercise for longer. Step 5. Make it interesting. Sometimes as coaches we can get too bogged down in what we're delivering. We can forget who we're delivering it to and what they think about it. But the more varied, light-hearted and challenging we can make our sessions, the more people will want to engage with us. But we can do all of that, and people still won't like it if it doesn't feel, at least in part, like something resembling why they came in the first place. And this is where equipment can be really helpful. So if you're a swim coach, get your people in the water. If you coach soccer or rugby or tennis or cricket, get the kit out. And delaying the bit that your people came to you for will just frustrate them. Use the equipment or the environment you're in to help you make your warm-ups even more engaging and relevant. Step 6. Make it sociable. Human beings are social creatures by nature, and our need for belonging is powerful. But being sociable doesn't mean living in each other's pockets or spending the whole session together, but something simple like asking your group, in the walking around the room example, to make chains of certain numbers and copy what the first person does, or then swap the leader, can create a real feeling of acceptance, especially in new people, even if it's just for a few minutes. Step 7. Think beyond immediate workout. For the past 30 years at least, we have focused our warm-up efforts on the upcoming workout. But our people bring every single aspect of their lives, all that stress, all that previous injury into our sessions. And when we help them to manage that through our coaching practices, we can help them achieve much more. So while we might need to prepare them for the upcoming workout, making some simple changes that cover just a tiny bit more than that will, over time, make a huge difference across their lives as a whole. So I hope you've enjoyed our little foray into the warm-up, and if you check out the show notes, you'll find a link to be able to download a free checklist of these 7 steps so you don't forget. Oh, and of course, me and the rest of the Injury Hacking gang would love to know more about the kinds of coaching you do. So if you fancy being social with us, come on over and join us at our Injury Hacking Facebook community at injuryhackers.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time. The Unlocking Fitness podcast is a Most Motion original, hosted by me, Sarah Pitts. It's based on the Unlocking Fitness book series, which you can get from unlockingfitness.com. At the time of recording, book 1 in the series is available, with books 2 to 5 in the pipeline. You can find more Most Motion at mostmotion.com and on Facebook at Most Motion.